Okay, if we want to start off, if you maybe could tell a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for president.
Yeah, so my name is Reilly Arford, and I decided to run mostly because I saw a gap in student government and the students, right? Going through my college experience, I was denied twice from student government, and then given really no real alternatives as to where I should go in student government. I was passionate about it, I wanted to be a part of it, but I didn't really have any alternatives. So I just kind of want to as my motto says, put the student back in student government, right? And make it more student focused, make it more open to students, and making sure every student has the opportunity to be in student government.
Yeah, so you haven't had any experience in student government?
So I just recently got experience.
Okay.
So I am actually the deputy director of the It's On Us initiative, which is a sexual assault and interpersonal violence initiative here on the University of South Carolina. We are actually situated in the VP's office. So last semester we were situated in the Senate, and that was a little contentious. We kind of had to figure it out, work some things through, things like that. But once we did move over to the VP's office, it's been a smooth ride. Yeah. I've got to learn kind of both the ins and outs of the VP's office as well as Senate. So I have a little varying experience, not much, but a little bit.
Yeah, how has that experience maybe possibly prepare you for this position?
Yeah, I think it's prepared me an immense amount, because what it does is I know kind of what it takes in the Senate the Senate chambers, and what it takes to create legislation and make legislation for the students. And it gave me a deeper insight into kind of that gap that I was talking about, where students and the student government, where that gap lies in one part of the student government, which is the Senate. And then getting over to the VP's office, you have a lot more programming aspects. You have a lot more aspects where you are creating things for students, right? But there's still that gap. We have initiatives in the VP's office like It's On Us, right? That a lot of students probably don't even know about. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of initiatives like Carolina Closet that people may know about, but may have no idea where it's even at, right? So pushing that out and mainstreaming that information so that all students can get that information, right? That, I think, has prepared me the most for going into this race and into this campaign.
Yeah. Could you take some time and elaborate a little bit more on your other platform points?
Yeah, so kind of where I'm coming from is I want to create an equitable seat for everybody at the student government table, right? At the table, right? So kind of I'm doing it with a three-pronged approach. So that first one being build equitable seats. So the first thing we got to do is build them. Right? If one person is sitting at the table and they have a plush, cush, nice seat, and they're sitting back, got their feet kicked up, that's fine, that's great. But the person next to you might have a straw seat where they sit down and immediately fall through the seat, right? So we need to know how to build seats for everybody at the table, and then build those seats, right? So that way everybody can have an equitable seat, right? Then my next approach is going to be challenging our students, right? Challenging our students to step outside of their usual tables, right? And you can kind of look at this kind of an analogy like when we were in middle school or in elementary school and we had to sit at the same table, right? You get to know all of these people and you know them and you've created this family atmosphere, right? But as Carolina, we are a Carolina family, right? So we should be sitting at each and every table we can to experience that. We've all experienced what experiential learning is like in college because we're living it. That's what college is for. So that challenge is for each and every student to kind of branch away from their table and go sit at another table and see what that experience is like. My third approach is going to be the teach approach. So that is going to be opening up student government's doors and saying, hey, this is what we do, guys. This is how we operate. So with that being said, we want to teach you guys how to come in here and be successful in student government while also teaching you how to build sturdy seats, build equitable seats, and sit at other tables because it's not always known and it's not always easy to know how to sit at other people's tables.
Yeah. Could you maybe give some examples on how you would kind of reach some of these goals?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my main priorities, right, is establishing a curriculum. So what that kind of looks like is when students come into college and they're from a place where they might not have had any exposure to any other group other than, what they're associated with, they come into college and get that initial training, right? So our freshman class, we have to take alcohol, EDU, substance abuse courses, modules. I want every student to have to take a module to increase diversity and equity, right? Because it's something, like I said, experiential learning, right? And then reshaping our U101 classes so that students know that USC stands for these things, right? These specific pillars, but we don't accept any of these other things. And we do that for a variety of other topics, but we don't necessarily do that when it comes to diversity and equity, right? And so I want to make that a main hitting point and a main point for the campaign, or for the wow, I can't speak, for my time in office.
Yeah.
That's kind of, you know, one of the main points. There's other smaller ones as well, but we can talk more about that if you'd like.
Yeah. You know, a lot of those goals, to be able to achieve them, you would have to work really closely with like admin. How would you kind of work and be able to do that?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge part of what I want to do, right? Is bridging that gap between, right? You have that gap between the student and student government, but also bridging that gap between student government and admin, right? Making sure that we're meeting with our deans regularly, right? Making sure that, you know, as president, I'm sitting on the board of trustees, giving the issues that the students are bringing to the table to the board of trustees, right? Making sure that the president knows what issues are at the university and students are actively wanting and needing from the administration, right? And so bridging that gap so that there is no it's just a me and the president relationship, or it's just the me and board of trustees relationship, but saying, hey, no, these students, right? These students have a problem with what's going on in the university and what's happening. We need to change this, right? And making myself an intermediary instead of a sole holder of power.
Yeah. What are some key issues that you think that students want to see student government tackling?
Yeah, so I've started kind of developing that, but something that I've recently just been made aware of, right, is the treatment of our women's athletes, right? We have a fantastic women's basketball team that is not getting the same treatment as our fantastic men's basketball team, right? And so that has become prevalent just to me in the last day, is knowing that, right? Like I said, diversity and equity on campus, right? That is a huge issue. There was a protest about 2 weeks ago just to talk about the diversity and equity issues. A prominent example from that protest is a young girl, a freshman, was saying that in her dorm, her roommate had people come in and then start saying racial slurs, and she felt powerless in that situation. She didn't know, she felt scared to be at her apartment, but she felt scared to go to administration because she didn't know what USC would do or how they would react to that, if she would get in trouble, right? So creating safe spaces for everybody, right? So that person feels safe in their space, but also the other party, they know that that's not okay, and so they can feel safe in their apartment as well, because they both have a mutual understanding.
Yeah. How do you kind of plan to create more of that diversity within student government?
Yeah, so it all starts with me, obviously, right? I'm a part of, like I said, I'm the deputy director of It's On Us, so it all starts with me. So the first thing I'm gonna do is gather a group of very intellectual and like-minded individuals to be a part of my cabinet, right? And making sure that every single one of them is on the same route and goal that we wanna go towards, which is more diversity and inclusion. But also influencing the other branches of student government and saying, hey, VP's office, these are kind of the initiatives that we want to focus on this year. Are you on board? Like, can we make this work? Can we, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What initiatives do you want from me? What can I do for you, right? And same for the student senate, getting up there and saying, hey guys, this is what I want to do this year. This is where I want the university to go. These are the big changes we can make. Let's just make them. Like, let's actually put these things into execution, right? And so, like I said, with that being said, having all of student government on board with that, and so we're bringing people into vacant student senate seats because people are excited to be in this organization, the student government organization, because they're seeing that their friends are doing it, the people that they're close to are doing it, and it's this big movement on campus for everybody to get involved.
Yeah, you're talking about, getting more students involved. A lot of times, not many students are sometimes not aware of student government elections. How do you kind of plan to engage them during this election season?
Yeah, so one of the kind of outreach things that I've been working on is a platform to allow students to bring their grievances to my campaign, right? And so that way I can address them in videos. I can email them back directly, things of that nature, so that they know they're being heard, right? And I think that's a big issue. Is a lot of times students don't feel heard, and so when you don't feel heard, you don't want to participate in organizations that aren't hearing you, right? And so student government should always hear the students, right? Always, always, always. So my campaign is going to be focused on making sure that students feel heard, so that way when they come out to the polls, they feel heard at the polls as well, right? And they feel as though their voice matters at the polls.
Yeah. How did you kind of come around to making these goals for your campaign?
Yeah, so actually it's kind of funny. So I have a dog, and I was actually walking my dog one night, and I was thinking on it, and I was like, I know I want to do this, I just don't quite know how yet. And I was thinking about, me possibly getting a seat at the Board of Trustees table, right? And I was like, man, that is a big seat, that is a big, role to fill. And I was like, well, my whole purpose here is my goal is to change student government. So I'm walking my dog around my living apartment area, and I was just like, this is perfect. Like, building equitable seats is perfect. That's exactly what I want to do, to bridge that gap between the students, and then put students on a level over here with the administration.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, you don't have a running mate in this race, so how would you be able to kind of work with your vice president if you did get the role? Yeah,
that is a great question. That's something that I've had to, not necessarily come to terms with, but think about myself, right? Is how am I going to work with a vice president who may not have exactly the same goals? And my short answer is, if we're doing student government right, my vice president and speaker are all going to have the same goals, because we want students more involved, right? That's something that most people can agree on, right? We want students more involved. So it's in reality, it should be very, very easy for me to work with someone who wants the exact same things as me. And on issues that we don't necessarily agree on, that's something that we can work through. That is how you build, conflict builds bonds, right? And so building that bond to be able to say, all right, this is how I feel in this situation, this is how you feel. How can we come to a compromise so that we both are getting what we want, but not necessarily what we want, what the students need?
Yeah. Why do you think students should vote for you?
Honestly, to me, I'm the student candidate. I want to be a advocate for the students. So I'm never gonna pressure anybody to vote for me. I'm never gonna say, hey, vote for me, or USC's going to crap. I'm not gonna say that. But what I will say is I have a passion for this university. I love this university. I want to see it be better. I want to see it be the greatest university it possibly can be, right? And how you do that is putting me in office, right? So that way we can work together to make this university as best as it can possibly be.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would think the student body should know?
Not really. You kind of touched on all my points there. I think like I said, my biggest things: build, challenge, teach. I'm gonna be you should be seeing that everywhere real soon. Build, challenge, teach, right? We wanna make sure we're drilling those home so that the student body knows that we're here to build equitable seats, challenge our students to sit at other tables, and to teach them how student government works and how to build those sturdy seats at equitable tables.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So basically, if you could explain a little bit about your experience with student government, and then how it could maybe help prepare you for the role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had 2 different roles in student government. 2 years ago, I served as the Secretary of Campus Relations on the Executive Cabinet, which was a really unique position because I got to work with a lot of student organizations and hear from students firsthand the concerns they have. And honestly, it was super eye-opening because I realized how little faith students have in their own student government. And I think that disconnect is clear, and it's that we haven't been historically putting students first. And so this year, I've had the honor of serving as the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Student Body President, and I've gotten to work alongside her and really see the role firsthand and work on projects such as centralizing advising and expanding parking on campus. And those things are great, and I've been so inspired by the work that she's done and getting to work alongside her on those projects. But there's still so much more that we can do. There's still so many concerns students have, student frustrations that continue to go unheard and unresolved. And being able to see this role firsthand, I know how I can make tangible and realistic solutions to those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of touched a little bit on, parking. Could you go into more depth about what your campaign platform really is?
Yeah, I would love to. That's my favorite part. So with parking, obviously that's a big headache for a lot of students on campus. So for one, $800 to park on campus for a year just to come to classes or be involved is a little ridiculous. For students who are here on financial aid or whatever the reason may be, we want to offer students discounted parking passes on a rolling application basis, so students can apply for a half-off parking pass so that they are still able to afford on campus no matter their background or their financial stability. So that's something that's super important to us. Another thing we want to do is create an on-campus parking guide, because so far that doesn't exist, and so students aren't often aware of all the places they could park. We want to show them the most convenient places they could park for where their classes are, what they're involved in, and also the most cost-efficient places to park. Another component of our platform and a priority of ours is safety. Safety in 5 points, safety on campus, and especially safety on game days, because that is a huge issue. One way we're going to do that is install charger plugs in Williams-Brice Stadium. We have the budget with student government to do that, so no students walking home or getting separated from their friends with a dead phone. Another thing is that we're the only SEC school that doesn't have an Uber discount on game days. So we would really like to work with Uber to create that. That way students can get to and from the stadium safely and nobody's getting behind the wheel intoxicated. Another thing is advocating for Carolina cores that really prepare students for life skills. I know I personally and a lot of my friends would benefit from a tax course over maybe a biochemistry course. And so preparing students, whether it be financial literacy, mental wellness, physical wellness, home economics, etc., I think a lot of students would prefer classes like that prepare them for more than just their career after college. So I would love to advocate to the provost's office on those things. And then another huge priority of ours is communication. There is a lot of great resources that the university offers for free, such as Thrive at Carolina, our new mental wellness platform that's been super successful at other SEC schools, but we just don't market it well enough to students. So they're often not informed of those things. And since mental health is something that I've personally struggled with and I see a need for on campus, I want to really prioritize marketing that. Another thing is representation and just making sure that every student on this campus feels welcomed, respected, and valued. We want student government to better mirror the student body. Every major, every ethnicity, every race, gender, religion, etc., that should all be a part of student government. We love political science majors, but we shouldn't all be political science majors, because if we want to be able to voice the needs of students, we need to have all the voices of students represented.
Yeah. How do you kind of aim to work towards that greater diversity within student government?
Yeah, so I think a huge component of that is recruitment. We have a lot of great organizations on campus that have done so many great works for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think partnering with them to utilize their resources and to help recruit from specific groups on campus and all different groups on campus, and they can kind of lend a hand in just helping us to do that in an equitable way.
Yeah. And then you talked a little bit about, the budget of student government. What are you really hoping to put that budget towards?
So like I said, it's over a $55,000 budget, and since it comes directly out of students' tuition and fees, we want to make sure it's going back to benefit students. So a couple of things like I touched on earlier will be installing charger plugs in Williams-Brice Stadium, the Uber discount on game days, discounted parking passes. Those are the three huge things that I would love to put that budget towards, in addition to just the regular day-to-day things that student government can provide.
Yeah. And then could you elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to kind of implement those new Carolina core classes possibly?
Yeah, so the role of student body president, you get to work very closely with deans and the provost's office and the president's office. So I would love to use that position to be able to advocate for those things for students. There actually is a committee being formed on reforming the Carolina core process, so I think this is the perfect timing to kind of remodel them, and I would be able to have a voice in that committee, hopefully, to voice the opinions of students and finally put their wants first.
Yeah. And then I also want to hear a little bit more about your running mate. Why did you kind of decide to choose to run with your running mate?
Yeah, well, first of all, Abrianna Reaves, she's just amazing. She's just such a cool person. I've gotten just so close with her over this process, but we actually were friends before because she is part of the Greek Relations Committee in student government. But I think what really attracted me to run with her is that she's a marketing and finance student, and so much of what the vice president's office does is marketing, and I think that is one area we really need to improve in student government. Like we talked about earlier, that's a huge key to recruitment. It's a huge key to communication. If we're going to communicate the resources on campus and we're going to communicate that, hey, come join Student Gov, we're a welcoming organization, we have to have somebody that knows how to market themselves well and market the organization well. And she has shown through all of her different experiences on campus, whether it be the social media chair of Alpha Gam or being an AK side, that she can do that.
Yeah. You talked about trying to get students involved. Sometimes it can be very difficult to get really students invested in the student government elections. How do you kind of plan to do that this election season?
So I think in general, one issue there is that there is a stigma around student government and kind of not the best culture there. And I think I want to show students that we're students just like y'all, and we want to put y'all's needs first. And so I think that my main priority there is uniting everyone around that common goal of finally putting students first. We're the biggest stakeholders in this university, so there's no reason that we shouldn't be put first. I don't think there's any student on this campus that wouldn't prioritize student safety, student equitability, student resources, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So when you say kind of students first, what do you think that looks like? What would the administration do to kind of be, say, student first?
I think, first of all, just a listening ear from the administration. We can meet with them all we want, but if they could just have an open mind and we can show them that, hey, this isn't just something that one group of students want, this is something that all students want. And I think that we based our platform points around things that we continuously hear students have frustrations about and concerns about. And so I think that since we can voice those opinions and say this is a consistent frustration, these are things that all students are concerned about, this is important to bettering the university, bettering the student body, and bettering the domino effect of students that leave here.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask, what would you say to student voters for why they should vote for you?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that I offer a very unique perspective in that I am a very hard worker and I'm very organized, but specifically I like to have a relational element to every goal. I'm not here to just check off the box of leadership position or service to others. I want to genuinely make an individual impact in each student's life. I really want to have that relational element to every goal I set in office, and as your student body president, I would prioritize every single student on this campus.
How would you plan to do that?
I think that the biggest thing is talking to students and being a part of the student body. I'm a huge believer that you can't represent campus unless you're part of campus. So through my different involvements on campus and my running mates' different involvements on campus, and by surrounding ourselves with staffs who offer different aspects of campus, we can really hear those student concerns first.
Yeah. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you would like to tell the student body?
I love this university. I actually, in second grade, I had a journal entry that my mom showed me the other day of where I wrote that it was my goal in life to come here and be a real Gamecock, but I didn't know if I was good enough. And so I know I'm making that little girl really proud in this opportunity. I just love having this outlet to make a difference in others' lives within my means. And I think that that's something that's my parents have always really inspired in me. They're both teachers, and they're like, pour into people where you are, however you can. And that's what I intend to do in this role.
Yeah. Do you think there's any issues that the student government, or not student government, the student body is really looking at that they would like student government to tackle?
I think just some things that I've already touched on. I think communication is huge. They hear the most from us during election season, and that's not really fair. We campaign for your vote, but then we don't serve you the rest of the term. So I think communication is huge, communicating those free university resources like I talked about. And then staying on footing with other SEC schools and things such as the Uber discounts, the safety on campus, equity, that kind of stuff, mental health, all those things that are really big issues on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you so much. And if y'all want more information, please follow us on our social media at Thompson Reaves 23.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background and what prompted you to want to run for student body vice president?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've grown up in South Carolina my whole life. I'm from Myrtle Beach. I came to South Carolina, something I've always wanted to do. I grew up going to football games here. So honestly, if I told myself that I was going to be here doing this when I was younger, I wouldn't have believed it, but it's super exciting. Honestly, what prompted me to do this specifically is just my involvement on campus. I'm involved in Alpha Gamma Delta, Alpha Kappa Psi, and Gamecock Consulting Club, and then student government, of course. But I really wanted to do something more, something that could actually make a bigger impact on campus. And the way I felt doing that was, or at least with my strength specifically, with the student body vice president position, it's a very communicational role. I do a lot of work with social media already and just making connections and networking on campus, and I think that that's what really drew me to this role specifically.
So tell me a little bit about, you said that you've been involved with student government. What shape has that taken, and how do you think that will inform your campaign?
In student government so far, I will say I am a newer member. I joined the Greek Relations Committee, and I've actually had the opportunity of being the first professional fraternity chair, which is really nice, just kind of getting to see what the professional fraternities want, and to see from student government and see from leaders on campus, because I don't think there's been as much clear representation for us there. But really, like I said before, I wanted to figure out how to help people a little more and have like more of an overall role, and I had a lot of ideas there and really wanted to see that put into action. So that's kind of how like the student government role helped shape that, and more so like I said, I liked talking to the different people, the different leaders on campus, and really taking what they want to see and really implementing that elsewhere.
So, newer member of student government, like you said. So, how do you kind of couple that with saying, I'm newer to this, but I'm a good candidate because?
So really how I take that is that I did see my freshman year student government from the outside. So I was able to really see what other students were saying about it and seeing it from an outside perspective, so that I am not just within student government, but also a regular student on campus. So I am able to see and hear, or I was able to see and hear what other students have to say. And also a big thing that I want to try and do during my time would be to bring other kinds of people into student government, people that are involved in other things on campus, because really representing the whole student body, you can't do that with just people that are involved in the same organization. So I really want to bring different demographics and different organizations to student government as well.
Yeah, so I know that your campaign released a video last night right after the candidates meeting. Can you kind of expand on what the platform is, sort of the main pillars?
Yeah, of course. So our saying really is students first, and we mean that wholeheartedly. We want to see this university put the people that truly matter, the students, first, putting their needs and wants first. And the way we want to do that is with tangible solutions. We've seen people run on far outreach platforms before, and we really want to see tangible solutions in place. So the way we want to do that is with the student government budget that's over $55,000. That's very real. We can use that to, one, for parking purposes. We want to create a parking guide, because there's so many places to park on campus. We can probably alleviate everyone parking in Bull Street or in Pendleton. Also with game day, everyone loves game day. We want to keep it fun, but we want to keep it safe. So we want to implement an Uber discount, which every other SEC school does, so it's very tangible. This will keep everyone safe getting to and from games. And also something small but very important is implementing charger plugs underneath Willie B, which will keep everyone in communication with their friends, never saying, I'm lost, I don't know how to contact them. And then elsewhere would be revitalizing Carolina Core. This is something that I've experienced myself issues with. I'm a marketing and finance major. I had to take a chemistry lab that really took up a time in my schedule that could have been used elsewhere, learning life skills such as financial literacy or mental and physical wellness, because that's something that will be helpful to me in the long run.
As far as revitalizing Carolina Core, you know, you talk about things that don't really seem necessary, chemistry for, you know, a marketing major or something like that. But how do you couple that with saying, you know, we don't need all of these classes, but we want well-rounded students? How do those coexist?
I think that implementing these courses makes students even more well-rounded, because while they may not be taking, like I said, chemistry for a business major, they will be taking courses that are relevant to their life and that will help them be well-rounded as a person. And this, I think, is honestly more valuable and beneficial, because in reality, you can ask anyone that's graduated, say, any course that wasn't related to their major, they're probably not going to say that they remembered that the most out of everything that they learned in college and that was beneficial to them.
So, okay. I mean, I understand where you're going with that, making sure that things are useful. So are you wanting to take courses that are already offered at the university and make those required things that you think are like valuable life skills, or create sort of a new type of curriculum entirely?
Yeah, of course. So I think a little bit of both. A course that already exists that I, as a business student, had the opportunity to take is BADM, which is basically a course that helps you with all your professional skills, resume building, LinkedIn workshops, interviewing skills, and I think that will be a great course to implement for students across campus because I personally have a lot of friends in other programs that don't have the opportunity to do that unless they're involved in something else on campus that does that, and having this offered as a course would be really helpful. But I think also working with administration to see if we can implement some more courses that are focused more on that, like physical and mental wellness type things that aren't already implemented would also be a solution. But there are courses that already exist that I think we could just open up to a larger population.
So looking at your campaign with a broader scope, you're running alongside Emmie Thompson, who's running for president. Why do you feel like that partnership is right, and what started that?
For Emmie, as a person, I met her through mutual friends that I met being on Greek relations and student government. But the second I met her, honestly, what stuck out to me was the fact that she genuinely cares about what she wants to do, and that's the reason she's here. If she's not here for the title or anything like that, I really saw the genuine kindness in her and the genuine drive to do more. And I think that both of us pair extremely well for this because, like I said, we're both involved in many other aspects of campus besides student government. And I think with that diverse mindset, we can really bring in different perspectives into student government and into leadership roles that perhaps haven't been there as much before.
So bringing in your perspective and also your position on the ticket. Programming wise, that's a lot of what the vice president does. Do you have specific programs you already know going in? These are things that I want to implement and kind of center my vice presidency around.
So I think that what I want to focus on specifically is bringing a culture back to student government, really making it more relationship based. And I think the way to do this is host more per se social events that people in student government can gather and really get to know each other instead of it being more so an environment where you go in, do what you need to do, leave, and you know the people on your committee or your branch. But I think it's really important that there is a well-rounded relationship-based aspect of student government, and I think doing that through these specific events that I'm thinking of would be the best way to implement it.
From your perspective as somebody who is involved, where do you think the culture of student government stands right now?
I think right now, like I said, I got to see it from an outside aspect. I think a lot of people from the outside don't really feel as if it's an approachable aspect. I feel like people see it as, okay, they do what they do, but they're not really interested in anything else. And I think internally, it's not as much that. It really is. People do try to see other parts of campus, but I think that if you're not in on a specific team with these people, that you maybe don't know everyone else as well, and I just think that that can be improved significantly. And I know that's hard to do in most large organizations, but I've seen it happen in other places on campus.
And I want to address the obvious here. You're the only candidate for this position. How do you think that will affect your campaigning and how your campaign with Emmie functions going forward?
Of course. I mean, in my mind, yes, I'm the only candidate on the ballot, but that doesn't mean I'm the only candidate. There is write-ins, and so I'm not looking at it that way. I'm not looking at it as if I'm the only person there. Our team is campaigning as if we're each running against 5 other people. We're not taking it any different, and I wouldn't want anyone else to take it any different because we want to prove to people that we deserve this position and that we shouldn't just be placed into it.
So how do you plan to engage student voters, not only the people who are going to vote and figuring out who they want to vote for, but bringing in students who maybe weren't going to vote? How do you plan to engage them during this season?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of people that I have personal connections with on campus have talked to me already and been like, hey, my friends are the people that don't vote. I want to go talk to them specifically. We want to speak at as many organizations as possible, and not the organizations that we're already involved in or already have connections with. We want to go speak to these organizations that we don't know as much about and give them the time to speak with them personally and see what concerns they have and give them a real reason as to why they should even vote in the first place.
Is there a particular sector of campus, a type of organization that you feel like is relatively untapped and you want to visit during these weeks?
For me personally, I just think outside of Greek life in general, we're a part of that. We want to move outside of that, and I think more so into these smaller organizations that we've gotten connections with or are trying to get connections with that we're reaching out to on campus, that people may see that they're smaller, but they're I think it's still a valuable part because, like you said, not everyone votes, and we want to give them a reason to vote. I think specifically just seeing who will allow us to speak, but also not necessarily just organizations in general. I'm going to talk to every person I possibly can walking on campus as well.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that I didn't ask you that you want to speak to the voters about?
I would just want to say that, as we were kind of talking about before, just the importance of voting in general is extremely important. I think that every student has opinions about our campus and about our university, but I think that if they want to see those things change, that it's important to think about who's in these leadership positions on campus, and just to take the time to look at what the candidates have to present, and just to make sure that you align with them, and to just vote to get those leaders in office.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. So if we want to start off by you maybe introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Cameron Eubanks. I am a junior here at the University of South Carolina. I am a double major and a minor, so I majoring in international studies and criminal justice with a minor in theater. Really could not be more different, but they're very fun. I've pretty involved around campus. I'm in Alpha Sigma Phi, a social fraternity, and then I'm also in PAD, which is the pre-law fraternity here on campus as well. I'm a performer at the University of South Carolina's Department of Theater and Dance. I'm also performing Overreactor's improv group, Green Room Productions. So I'm pretty spread out around campus. Regarding student government, I've been in student government for pretty much all of my time here at USC. I filled a vacant seat in the Student Senate my freshman year in the 112th term, and then ran for a seat for the College of Arts and Sciences in the 113th. And then right now I am currently serving as the Director of Student Services in the Office of the Student Body President.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how kind of has that student government experience maybe prepared you for running for this role?
Yeah, so it really has prepared me. If I look at it holistically, being able to be a part of both branches, legislative and executive, kind of gives you both sides of the coin, right? Legislative, you're making bills, you're passing resolutions, you're writing recommendations based on what the students would like to see changed in university operations, and you're commemorating or awarding people outside of the campus and their accomplishments. Whereas the executive branch is more of the implementation of those changes, right? It's working with faculty, working with the administration, working with the new president and his staff to get those bills that are passed and to get those legislation that's passed on its feet, and to see how it works in the real world. Through Student Senate, I was able to be part of the Student Life Committee for pretty much my entire 2 terms. I was also able to chair the Academics Committee when Taylor Harris stepped down. And then through my time in the President's office, I've been able to advise President Newton on all things student services, so academics, Greek life, diversity and inclusion, pretty much anything that falls under that umbrella, and just kind of advising her on different stances she should take on different university operations, policies, and things that we should change. So, I would say going from writing the change and to implementing the change really shows you how student government can be effective on this campus. And so I think that's kind of my unique position. And I think that's what kind of best prepares me for this role, is seeing legislation that can work and seeing how that works on a university scale, but also knowing how to persuade my colleagues to vote for that piece of legislation, or to talk about it with faculty and administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did you want to run for speaker?
Yeah, so ever since I joined as a freshman, I always kind of looked up to the speaker. When I first joined, it was J.D. Jacobus, and then my first full term as a senator was under Moore-Johnny McDevitt. And just the way she advocated for student voices at an administration level, but also the way that she interacted with senators. And how she was kind of the calming force in a very divisive Senate, and a very big Senate with big personalities and big opinions. And so that just kind of sparked my interest in trying to be that calming force in student government, but also trying to be an exec level advocate for different policies and different changes in operation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned, being a calming force. How would you kind of be part of creating a positive culture within the Senate?
Yeah, I definitely think that's very important. It's one of the things that makes Senate work, is that positive reinforcement and that positive culture. Over the past couple of terms, we have a lot of big personalities, a lot of big opinions, and we've got to learn to bring civil discourse into the conversation. And so kind of how I want to create a more positive environment in the Senate is to make sure that we're focusing on legislation that impacts the student on their daily lives, not legislation about national government issues, not legislation about even global issues that our student government doesn't necessarily have the purview to change, but rather to focus on real life change that affects the person walking beside me on Green Street, the person eating across from me at Russell House. And those changes come from education. What is legislation? What is a recommendation? What is a resolution? And how are they written? For example, a recommendation on installing more water bottle type filling stations in one of the older buildings, that is change that directly impacts students. But doing a resolution on the death penalty is not something that impacts students whatsoever. And so it's really, really about focusing on those important pieces of legislation that aren't politics, they aren't divisive, they are literally just what the student needs in their everyday lives. That's what creates a positive culture. Trying to get away from those very divisive and polarizing bills and resolutions and recommendations. But it's really just focusing on the right type of legislation.
Yeah. If you could elaborate a little bit more about your main platform statements. Yeah.
So our campaign is divided under 3 key terms, right? Transition, transform, transcend. Now, when we think about transition, we want to transition the current Senate that we have into a better one, into something that we aspire to be, right? So we want to transition the Senate, and like I just said earlier, to creating more pieces of legislation that focuses on what the student needs and not national government issues or issues outside of the purview of our student government. We want to transition the Senate into looking more reflective of our student body. And that comes from the speaker being a very bipartisan force, not choosing sides, not influencing one senator getting elected than another. It's about being a very calming and undivided force. When we think of transform, we want to transform what the university has to offer right now. A big part of my platform is transforming academics when it comes to advising, switching every college to a professional model. And that's something that President Emeritus is starting to do, but it's how do we support him as a student senate? How do we pass legislation that supports that? We also want to transform student disability issues around campus, making sure we have a lot of old buildings here on campus. And so we want to make sure they're all ADA compliant, and we want to make sure that we're giving those students the best opportunities we can give other students as well. And that goes for in general, transforming the way our student services are implemented on this campus to be a more inclusive student services, right? We want to make sure every student has the exact same service provided to them that they do for another student. And so that's really part of the transition transform. And then the transcend is what we're transcending our environment, our culture to be, right? We want to transcend student government and the student senate to be a more cohesive branch within our student government, rather than thinking of ourselves as senators and president staff, more thinking of ourselves as a one student government that is attacking one goal, right? We want to advocate the best we can for students, even when we might disagree with what students want. It is our job to advocate for what the students want and the students need. And so it's really about creating that cohesive culture between the executive branch and the legislative branch into a more positive environment. We also want to transcend exactly what we talked about in Imagine Carolina. All of the issues that were brought up, parking, advising, diversity and inclusion, job preparedness. We want to transcend all of those things into a better Carolina and a better tomorrow. And so that really is just working with President Reaves on the goals that we found out from Imagine Carolina. And that's kind of, again, creating a more inclusive environment through a more representative body, through a more representative campus, and ultimately through a more accountable student government, right? I want committees to hold town halls so they are hearing directly from the students what the academics committee can do for them. We want to make sure every Senate member, every student government member in general is held accountable, and so that the students can feel like they're actually being represented.
Yeah. I would love to hear a little bit more about maybe some of your first steps towards creating that kind of inclusive environment that you're talking about.
Yeah. Great question. I think one of the first steps is to creating that inclusive environment is, again, making our student government more accountable to students, right? I think that's the baseline. That is the most basic function we can do as an organization. And so essentially what I want to do is have committees hold town halls, whether that be monthly, annually, quarterly. We'll work those details out when we get there. But making sure that the committees are holding town halls and hearing from students what that specific committee can do on sustainability, diversity and inclusion, student life, academics, finance, health and safety, all of those committees, and making sure that the town halls are in a more specific subject matter. So a student can go up and say, hey, I don't feel safe in 5 points. And student will talk about their experience, and then the committee will say, well, here's what we can do for you. Here's legislation that we can pass. That's step one. Step two is to creating a more representative body. Now, obviously that's kind of a hard task to do because you can't force people to run, you can't force people to be really gung-ho about student government. But what you can do is make sure that we're a bipartisan student government. We don't choose sides, we don't hold up one member over another. We are an inclusive student government that values everyone's opinion. And that really comes down to not focusing on the divisive legislation that we have been in the past couple terms. Not focusing on whether to impeach the president on a he said, she said scenario, right? It's focusing on the things that matter. And those are, does a student need a better water filling station in Gambrell? Do we need another wheelchair ramp when it comes to Corel? It's those types of things that impact the student's experience every single day. And that's the things that we need to be focusing on. And ultimately, that'll kind of shed light onto a more inclusive organization.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, you've already mentioned a few, but what do you think are the biggest issues that the student body would like to see student government tackling?
Yeah. I would say the biggest hot button issue is parking and advising. Both of those issues were probably one of the biggest we heard at Imagine Carolina, and both of those issues were highly communicated to the administration and to faculty. And so specifically with advising, through my 2 terms as senator and through my term as Director of Student Services, I've been working with Claire Robinson with the University Advising Center on what does it look like if our campus switched to an all-professional model? How much money does that take? How can student government be there to support the Board of Trustees as they figure out how to get that done? And ultimately, I think it's really about just advocacy and constant advocacy, not breaking from the advocacy. So in my 2 terms, I worked on legislation kind of reshaping the advising process, making sure that advisors aren't using outdated major maps, making sure that each student feels that they are adequately advised when they leave their session. And so that's the work we want to continue, and we want to continually to advocate for now that President Reaves has set that as a goal for his administration and his priority. And so we want to also accelerate that timeline, right? We want to accelerate all the colleges getting to a professional model. And so what does that look like from a student perspective? That's what we really want to tackle. I would also say with parking, it's really about trying to look at the lots we have now and the garages we have now inadequately looking at those prices and looking at how we can expand those while keeping the price down. I think right now a garage pass is at $400 a semester, so you're looking at $800 out of the gate for both semesters. That is ridiculous. That is extremely high. And for a student who's working here, who's paying for their college, paying for their tuition, that's an unnecessary expense. And then, you know, if they don't have the pass, they'll spend 20, 30 minutes looking for parking. So it's about lowering the prices of garage passes and service lots, but also looking at what garages are in Columbia and who can we partner with as a university to have students park in those garages, right? Garages across from the State House, garages on Main Street, those are privately owned, but how can we foster a relationship and a connection between that private business and our university to make a bigger space and a bigger environment for kids to park at? Especially with the new dorms and all the new apartments that are coming, Sawyer on Lincoln, Campus Village by Bates. We want to make sure that we have parking for every single student at an affordable rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why should students vote for you for speaker?
Yeah. You know, maybe it's just the way I was raised, but I think this election you have two really good candidates, including myself, on the ballot. So I would encourage students to really look at what they want to do with the position, right? Because technically anyone can run for this position. All you need is 30 credit hours. You don't have to have any involvement in student government. That's just an added bonus, right? So you really want to look at what the candidate can do for this position. And so I hope students will take a look at my campaign platform, will tune into the debate and see what I want to do under those three theme words, right? We want to transition, we want to transform, and ultimately we want to transcend our Carolina into a better Carolina for tomorrow. And so, you know, I can't necessarily say that I'm better than another person because I feel like that wouldn't be fair. But what I can say is I've been a devoted student government worker and a devoted student government participant since a freshman year. I wouldn't be spending this much time on it if I didn't care about the students, if I didn't care about real change on campus. So I would just encourage students to really, really look at what we want to do with the position, and then, you know, vote however their heart desires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about or didn't mention that you think it's important for students to know?
Yeah. Like I said, I'll just kind of reiterate. Election season is crazy. You've got a lot of people trying to get their name out there, trying to get their platform. I would just encourage students to really, really look at the platforms, look at what each candidate wants to do with that position, and, you know, and really vote with who would be best for the position, who would elevate the Carolina to a better Carolina, who would make their student experience better and easier, and who would make the environment more inclusive. And so I would encourage students to really, really pay attention to the platforms, pay attention to how each candidate holds themselves. I know my campaign will be out on Green Street over the next couple weeks. We'll be at the debate. We have a big social media presence, and so really it's just I want to get every student informed on the candidates out there so they can choose the best option come February 21st and 22nd.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So if you would start off by introducing yourself and then maybe saying a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Jordyn Velez. I'm a political science major. I'm a sophomore, but I am graduating next year. And I have two minors. I'm in Spanish, and I am a Lawn Society minor. So, you know, added that on there. Really interesting. Anything else about myself? I'm actually from Knoxville, Tennessee. I came here because my mom went to USC Aiken, and so she's been at Gamecock, and that was, you know, like an important bonding for me. And then I toured the campus. South Carolina responded to me first, so that kind of set the tone out of all the schools. And I came to the campus with my dad, and I really liked it, so that's why I came here. And I'm really happy that I did come, because I really do love it here. So I think it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah. Why did you decide to run for speaker?
The reason I decided to run for speaker is because as chief of staff, I see things that I know I can tangibly change, and I also know the management of it. I'm familiar with the people in Senate right now, so knowing those structures and seeing those things that I know that I can change, for example, engagement with the student body, things that I'm already doing and have started to do when I transitioned in the chief of staff, I know that I could do as speaker and execute them in a better manner. And I think that I can help foster a better environment in student government that's more inclusive and welcoming for students. And that's like really, really important for me. And I think that we can work on mending kind of the tension between the branches and making sure that everyone feels like they have a place in student government, and not just for working, but for like a community. So that's probably the gist of why I want to run for speaker.
Could you explain a little bit more about your experience with student government and how it could potentially prepare you for this role?
Right, so I actually was elected in as a senator to the 214th Student Senate. And so I served on 3 committees in there, so I'm very familiar with all of that. I'm familiar with the legislation writing. I helped do some of the projects. We did a project for providing menstrual products in some of we're doing it in the Thomas Cooper Library. It's actually still getting set up, but we have the machine, so it'll get put in. And so kind of with that, I know the committee structures, and then when I transitioned into chief of staff, I took on the administrative role, so managing the senators. I'm familiar with the more technical side of legislation again. I go to all the rules committees, which is where we do like the editing and making sure that things are feasible. So there's that. I take care of all the attendance and committees, so I already keep track of that. I know what ways that I can kind of tweak that, and whether or not I get this position, those will be things that I make sure I get tweaked before I'm out of here, because that's like the goal, to make it better than you, to leave it better than you found it, I guess. And then, so I have both sides of the coin. I know what it's like to be in the seat of a senator, and I know what it's like to be managing everything. So, I am able to gain that perspective that those senators have and make sure that I'm accommodating for them completely. But also, I know the nitty-gritty stuff already. I'm prepared for that. If I was to transition to the role right now, I could do it, because I already know the procedure that goes into it. Kind of the boring stuff, the parliamentary procedure that goes into it. I know how to get all the paperwork and transitioning. I know all the communications, kind of all that. And also I do administrative stuff, like, I said administrative stuff a billion times, but I already do kind of conflict resolution and things like that. So that would just be a part of the job that I already know how to do again.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about your main campaign platform?
Right, so my main campaign platform is engagement with the student body. I actually did an event yesterday, so a tabling event, and we're starting, it's called Ask a Senator, and the kind of idea of the whole thing is for senators or staff to get out and actually talk to people and to provide like snacks and things, because it's just good to provide for the community. But we had people come up and talk to us about things, in exchange for a cupcake. Tell me one thing that you think that would better your experience. And so that is something that I think student government needs more of. Too many of the people came up and they said that they don't know the function of student government. They don't understand how to get in contact. They don't know where it is, because while student government claims to, just slam that mic, while student government makes a lot of claims about kind of outreach, I don't think that enough people are willing to do the sitting down for 4 hours and like talking with people or getting ignored by people, because it's not very appealing and it's not always the most rewarding. You don't get as much credit for things like that, but I think that needs more, and that's something that I think is really important, and kind of making sure that people are able to access information that student government has also. And so that's the main thing that I'm running on.
Yeah, how do you kind of plan to engage students more through even this election process?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things with that. So I think even the election is flawed in the way that we have the information. I remember last year, when you're campaigning, you're obviously talking to all your friends, and people would talk to me and they didn't know why they couldn't vote for me, because I was running as a senator, so I would be in College of Arts and Sciences. If you have a friend in a different school, they can't vote for you because it's by delegation, and things like that are not explained, or they're not very readily available unless you're able to have a conversation with someone in student government or an elections commissioner. So the information, while we have some that's accessible, it's very difficult to really get through because we have a public drive. And while the drive has a lot of really good information, sometimes if you don't know how to use a Google Drive, it's overwhelming and it's very difficult to navigate. So with the elections just specifically, I think there needs to be better promotion of the times and dates. There needs to be more tabling earlier. I think that there could be different polling locations throughout the school to make sure that everyone is able to vote, because Darla Moore is so far out. Sometimes if you're, in your later years of school, you might not be coming to the Russell House where the polling location is. So just with elections specifically, that's a way that we can kind of spread that out there.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned kind of creating a welcoming community. I was wondering how you would kind of work on creating that positive environment in Senate.
Right. So when I joined Senate, I knew the speaker and maybe 2 other people. So I got in there, I sat down in my seat by myself, and I went home and I cried because I felt like for 3 sessions that I had gotten myself into something that I was not going to make any friends with, and it was going to be miserable. So right now, I try and go up to every new senator and talk to them. I've tried, as chief of staff, I really try to be someone that they can at the very least get information from, but also if they need to, someone that they can talk to. And I think that's the biggest part of it all, making sure that you have those conversations with people and try and get to know them, give them the benefit of the doubt. And so that's really, really big. And also making sure, conflict resolution is really big, making sure that those advisors that we have are used. If you have a conversation and you don't necessarily feel comfortable just having it one-on-one, having someone to kind of mediate that so that that environment is better, so that we don't have those tensions that are at a high. And so those are 2 ways, kind of talking to someone, making sure that they know that they have someone to sit with, someone to talk to, because as speaker, I would be able to be like, I know these people, you should sit over here, or come over and talk to them after Senate, because oftentimes it can feel really isolating and really intense because some of the debates do get intense. Mm-hmm. So also making sure that the parliamentary procedure during when we have, everything, when you see us banging the gavel and everything, making sure that that runs smoothly, that we're using that to the fullest extent. So that goes into training, which is another big thing that I want to work on. I actually asked the senator when I transitioned into chief of staff to write legislation to ensure better training. So when we know those rules, it's easier to not make it as personal. And so then that kind of helps to not foster a hostile environment.
Yeah. Could you give some examples of kind of what you mean by better kind of training? What would you be training them on, I guess?
Right. Okay. So when you go into Senate, you need to know, Senate specifically, you need to know how to write legislation. You need to know how to do the correct outreach, and you need to know how to do the parliamentary procedure and debate. So that's when you raise your placard, you're like, I motion for, it's technically supposed to be I move, but so all those things are not intuitive, and they're very complex processes. And so last year we didn't have constant workshops for vacant seats, so people will come in and they don't get any training at all. So that's one thing, making sure that those people that come in later are accommodated for, and also more detailed training. I think that last year we brushed over everything, and we didn't get any training on parliamentary procedure. We were just basically supposed to observe and emulate, which is not very effective all the time, because we got a list with the primary motions that you do. And if you're new and you've never done anything that uses Robert's Rules of Order, you're just gonna be sitting there and you're gonna have no idea what's going on, and you're gonna feel like everyone knows everything that you don't. And that's, again, very overwhelming. So those 3 things, you need to be taught how to reach out to administration, other kind of leaders within the student government, or even outside. That's kind of another thing that people need to be trained on. But I think that those have been lacking, and I think that those could be improved upon. And that's something that I'm really passionate about and would like to see going forward.
Yeah. I did want to ask you about maybe some issues you think the student body is worried about or would like to see student government tackle.
Yeah, so This is really interesting because, again, I did that entire thing yesterday. So I actually have currently a list that I just posted to the public information drive. So actually everyone has access to the list. We got like 50 main things. Of course, you have the big ones like parking and Wi-Fi, which unfortunately student government, while we can address those concerns, we can't necessarily put them into action. But I've seen things such as we can work for like the street lamps, kind of. A lot of them aren't working right now. I don't know what that is, but we can address that. I had calls for LGBTQ plus spaces on campus, such as gender neutral bathrooms, religious spaces on campus, like prayer rooms. Let me think. I think that a lot of people talked about diversity on campus. They don't see within organizations such as student government especially. If you don't see diversity, if you're a person of color, if you're a minority, you're not going to join because you're not going to feel welcome. And so I think that's something that we can better by reaching out to different groups and making sure that everyone feels like they have a place. I think diversity is a really big one on the minds of everyone at the university, especially with things such as like the names. I had a lot of like names of buildings specifically. I had people come up to me a lot yesterday to ask about that, what we are able to do about that, like Sims specifically got mentioned. So I think that those are probably some of the biggest issues in the student body. You know, it's a pretty big range, and I think that that's an issue that student government has had. I think we are more inclined to go after big, glorious things, and sometimes we ignore the tiny things like the street lamp is broken, even though that is feasible for us to fix. So I think that it's important to keep them all in perspective.
Yeah. How would you maybe go about tackling and starting to fix some of those issues?
Right, so it depends on the type of issue. So I was talking to our advisor and she was like, you should send this out to everyone so that we can delegate it between branches. So, you know, the executive branch, the vice president, president may be more inclined to fix something that's kind of bigger nature. They have to talk to the legislature, maybe talk to the president to try and get something through. While things such as street lamps, I can encourage senators to write legislation about that would urge the university to do things, get in contact with people in the university that, you know, can actually fix things. Maybe we can talk to a bunch of different offices about like gender neutral bathrooms. If we need to talk to someone, we can be like, hey, I need you to write this legislation for me, recommending that the university does this, but also reach out to them and CC me on the email and make sure that I can see what's going on. And that's how we start those conversations. It's, you know, one thing I don't think a lot of people understand about Senate is, you know, it's a really long process with a lot of things, and you have to be willing to be very patient with it, but that doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious also.
Yeah. Why should students vote for you for speaker?
Right, so the opportunity that I had to be a senator and chief of staff gave me a really probably unique experience with it and with Senate. So I think I am probably the most qualified for the kind of role as speaker in terms of moderating debate, taking care of the senators. And also in terms of getting the student body involved, I am always out there with student government. I was out there for 4 hours because I had a few other people. I actually did get senators to come out, but you know, for the most part, it was just me. I was at the student government tabling for the majority of the time. Like, I will put in the hours, and that's not a doubt that anyone should have, because student government has been my priority, and it will continue to be my priority going forward in this position or not. So I think that a lot of people aren't able to prioritize it like I am, and I have a really good understanding of the parliamentary procedure, taking care of the Senate, and also the processes to get involved with the right people. So I think a combination of all of those is good. And then also, you know, I'm a gay woman, so I understand that need to have that inclusive environment. So I'm willing to create that environment because I know firsthand what it's like to feel not unwelcome in an environment. So I think that with that perspective, along with the experience, those combine together for something that could be really good for a leadership role.
Yeah. How would you kind of create that inclusive environment?
Right, so first of all, just making sure that you're reaching out to the correct organizations, making sure that they you know, because a lot of times we see a divide in a lot of groups, or they don't feel welcome, making sure that you have to be willing to go out to certain clubs or like fraternities or sororities and talk to them, because I can send a billion emails, but that's not the same impact. Make sure that people know. And I have chosen to surround myself with people that are also very big on inclusivity, making sure that people feel welcome. So it's about having the right type of welcoming environment and making sure that when someone has a complaint, it's heard with constructive criticism. If someone tells me that I'm not doing something correctly, I'm going to listen to them, even if it hurts my feelings or I'm upset that I, you know, did something. You know, you have to be able to take that and go for it, and that's the only way that you can create that type of environment.
Yeah. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about or you haven't gotten the chance to talk about that you would like to tell the student body?
I think that, I'm trying to think. I'm like, I don't really think that there's anything crazy. I think that student government is an amazing opportunity to get involved, and we always have vacant seats in Senate. And when the president gets into office, the next one, we're gonna have a ton of open offices under the president. So, and they have committees. So my girlfriend's in one of the committees. I didn't even know she was in a committee for the longest time. And so there's like a ton of ways to get engaged with student government. And it's a really good way to get connected with student leadership and like administrative leadership. So it's a really great opportunity, and I think that everyone should try and get involved in it if they can. We understand, but also it is what you put into it, so it's not necessarily like the biggest time commitment that you could have too.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for coming
thank
today.
you.
I appreciate it. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
So to kind of start off with, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and, you know, why you decided to run for this position?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Badinski. I'm currently a junior at the university here. I'm in the College of Hospitality, Retail, and Sport Management. I do mock trial. I have a job off campus, and I was a senator this year. I was able to serve as the vice chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and I was also able to serve as the head of the delegation to my college, HRSM. It's a really fulfilling endeavor to be able to give back to your constituents, to be able to show the people that you work for that you are working towards meaningful change for them. I hope that most of my change is felt long after I'm gone. I don't want to be selfish with what I enact, and I recognize that I might not even be able to reap the benefits of some of it, but I wanted to run because I just want to see USC be the best university it absolutely can be.
Yeah, and you already kind of mentioned your experience in student government a little bit. Can you kind of expand on that experience so far and how, you know, you think it plays a role in the position you're running for?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Vice Chair of Judiciary, I was able to witness almost every piece of legislation that came into the Senate. I was able to pore over it with the chairwoman, Ms. Maeve Smith. She was able to teach me a lot about how it actually works, and I was able to learn through senators like Ian Hurd, the intricacies. I was able to talk to senators like Baber. I've been able to talk to people on the Finance Committee. I've been able to talk to people that want to write codes, write legislation that enacts changes to the finance codes. And through all of that, I've kind of reached the point where I am now.
Yeah, and what do you think makes you, you know, a good candidate for treasurer?
I am just pardon me. I would say unequivocally, I am all about the students. I want to educate, I want to help administer, and then I want to be very transparent through it. I want to teach every organization on campus how they request funds from student government. It's a very complicated process. It's convoluted, and I've been able to speak to a number of clubs that simply aren't allowed to request finances, allocations. I want to work to teach clubs how they register to become an actual organization with the school. And then once they're there, I want to teach them how they work through finance. I want to work to sort of overhaul the form, the request form, because it is very unclear currently. We could make it so that every organization has this opportunity. And then once we're there, I want to work to be transparent with the student body. All of student government, all of Senate finances, student activity funds comes from actual tuition that every single person in this room paid. I'm not sure the exact number, but I do know that the budget for the student activity fund was around $180,000 total this year. I know that in no year has the entirety of it been used, and I know that when it's not used, we don't get to roll it over into next year. All that money is lost to the university, and I want to see students do everything they can. I want to see every organization throw an event. I want to see that money used.
Yeah, and you kind of already touched a little bit about this, but can you expand a little more on what the main points of your platform are?
Absolutely. Educate, advise, and then be transparent through the entire thing. What I want to do, I want to teach people how to request money. I want to make it easier for people to request money once they are permitted by the university to do so. And then throughout the entire process, I want to be transparent. I want to work with student government advisors, and through the connections we have with the Palmetto Party, we have senators from almost every college. I want to work to create a website, whether it be an inward system like on self-service, where you can actually see how much of our student activity fund has been used for the current year. It's really a staggering thing to look at. We have this absolutely unparalleled opportunity to spend money that we pay, we deserve to spend, and we don't get to do it. I just want to basically help students do that.
Yeah, and how do you plan on educating students more? You know, like what are kind of some specifics of how you would go about doing that?
Absolutely. We have senators from every college, so we have senators across an array of clubs and interests on the Palmetto Party ticket. Through them, through people they know, through outreach to other organizations, people we've never talked to before. We want to be able to have a sit down with them, answer any questions they have, and we want to actually be able to show them, hey, this is your money too, please come take it. We want to be able to hold that dialogue, and we want to be there for anyone that has any questions.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of looking at how the request form, you know, is done. How would you work with the other executive officials of student government to kind of like help to rework that form, or, you know, make it simpler?
Absolutely. I'd be working with the finance committee primarily, but when I would be working with them, I would absolutely be open to input from the entire committee. The treasurer serves as a member of the finance committee without a vote, but throughout the process, I would love to be able to talk to fellow delegates and be able to communicate with them what I feel shortcomings in the current forms are, and also hear their input and work to find a solution. One glaring issue currently, just for an example, I won't derail us, but there's no place in the form to request mileage. If you have any traveling occasion, if you have a car, the university says they'll reimburse for mileage, but how do I request my reimbursement, Mr. University? We just want to be able to see that easier for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, the position of treasurer was previously dissolved because of concerns over, you know, allocation of funds and that type of thing. What do you hope with this position being, like, reinstated? You know, what do you hope to, like, how to address those concerns of allocation of funds?
I'm not worried at all. I feel as though I may have soapboxed a little bit about wanting to give out every cent of those funds. I want every organization to be eligible to draw from those funds. I don't want the finance to be withholding with that. We have no reason to penny pinch our own money. I want to see that recycled throughout our clubs, and I want to work to just sort of fix some of the issues we currently see in finance codes. Like one of those issues, the student finance committee, they won't permit funding of international trips. Well, if you have a club with a claim and you want to be recognized at an international level, we feel as though the student finance committee should be permitted to finance those things. It wouldn't change anything. Everything would still have to go through them, but an activity with merit shouldn't be ruled out just because it might be in Toronto.
What do you think are the core responsibilities of this position?
The core responsibilities of treasurer are impartiality, just devoted leadership. It is a very time-consuming position. You have to work relentlessly with your comptrollers and the finance committee in order to ensure that you are making good and effectively communicating with every organization you can. And while you're doing that, you also have to make sure that they're being correct within their submissions. Your comptrollers, they're there to help you, but you're there to help them. And I want to have an open line of dialogue with anybody that wants it. So it's a lot of hard work. But through the assistance of the people around me, I feel we'll be able to accomplish it seamlessly.
What do you think is something, the student body is looking for from this position in student government?
I don't think the student body really knows. I feel like I would be able to set the tone, and that is something that I'm very humbled and excited to do. I feel like I would be able to show the student body what a treasurer does. I want to show them that a treasurer is there to help you take the money that you pay your tuition to spend on club activities. I want to be able to show them that the treasurer isn't this evil person that just denies every request. If I had it my way, we would be approving every request within reason, but we will work to absolutely make sure that the treasurer is seen as a benevolent guy. We want to help the students. Students do well.
And I know a concern in the past has been, how much the student body participates in student government elections with voting and stuff like that. When it comes to, your platforms of educating and teaching, how do you plan to make students more engaged in that, want to be able to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you do is you let them know there's a benefit in them for them. Everybody is going to play an incentive, and for some of these clubs, the best way to do that is to let them know that you're on their side. I have absolute confidence in all of our student organizations. I want to see all of our organizations take a trip where they represent the university as their best selves. It's just letting people know that I'm here, being a little bit annoying with that. I'm here. Please let me help you.
What's the incentive you would say from you to give to students?
It really is amazing to help people. One of the best things in the world is being able to do something for someone else and seeing like an impactful change. Like, have you ever gotten flowers?
Yes.
And that like made your week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like seeing that on someone is the best thing in the world. Yeah. That's what we want to be able to do through helping all these student organizations.
Yeah. Why do you think students should vote for you?
I think students should vote for me because I will unequivocally represent them. I'm going to fight tooth and nail for the average student. I won't get caught up in any partisan hackery, and I truly believe that the University of South Carolina is one of the best universities in this nation. I think as treasurer, I'll be able to show students that the money is ours to take, and we have so much potential to do good things with those funds.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that I didn't mention or didn't ask you that you would like to say to students now?
Please vote. Please vote. Your vote matters. It absolutely matters. And every single one of you has a very, very important choice to make. Thank you guys so much for voting.
So to kind of start out with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like why you decided to run for this position?
Of course. So my name is Hannah Augsbach Lamma. I'm a sophomore at the Darla Moore School of Business. I've been in Senate since my first semester freshman year, where I joined the finance committee. And from then I was on that committee for a while before the new Senate term started, and I became the chair of the finance committee. And I've been in that position this whole Senate term. And I've had to lead a whole new group of finance committee members because we only had one or two returning members from the previous semester. So I really took the lead in training the new people and also like working with the student organizations to transition out of having a treasurer, because that was also something that we had in the past. And this was our first term not having it. And then later in the semester, I was working with the Secretary of Finance. The current one is David, but him and I, and before that it was Jason Zaprenzi, and we really talked about it. and we saw that there was a need for a treasurer. It's really important when communicating with student organizations and keeping everything in the process organized. I saw that firsthand as chair, and that's why I ended up writing the referendum to bring back the treasurer. So I'm really just running for this position because I saw how necessary it was. I saw that we needed better communication with student organizations. It got very confusing as a committee to have to not have that intermediary but between the student body and us, because it made it harder for them to make requests. And I want to kind of ease that process and just make I feel like my experience has shown me how I can do that and improve the system, and that's pretty much what I want to do.
Yeah, and you definitely touched on a little bit about, all the different roles that you've had. Can you go a little bit more into, how you think that experience will prepare you for this role, or has prepared you for this role?
Yeah, so I actually interviewed the secretaries of finance and the deputy secretaries of finance. So I kind of knew up front what was needed for those positions. And that was very similar to the treasurer role because they were basically acting as that while the treasurer wasn't in place. Now it's just moved into an executive office now, so they can have more staff and more support in order to better facilitate communication. And I think my main thing that would help from my experience is that I know the student organizations. I've been through all the finance process. I've been a treasurer of a student organization, so I know what it's like trying to submit a request, trying to submit for reimbursement. And it can be really confusing if you're not communicated with and told up front what needs to happen. So I've kind of been on both ends, both as an organization and as the one looking at the submissions for requests for funding, which is also really helpful because I would be training the new comptrollers who are looking through requests and looking what's wrong with them. And I have been on the committee before. I've been the chair of the committee. I've seen the mistakes that people usually make on requests. And I think because of that, I'll be a really good resource for student organizations when making the requests and when training them.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about, what you think makes you a good candidate for this position?
Yeah. So one, I have a pretty strong numbers and business background. Like I said, I'm a representative of the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm an accounting major. I work a lot with numbers and requests every day. I make budgets all the time. I've been the treasurer of Gamecock Consulting now for this term. And so I have a lot of experience there. I would say I'm very non-biased. I really am open to hearing other people's opinion, which I think makes me a good leader. And I've built a connection with a lot of the student organizations already on campus. And I think that that's really important because I feel like they'll be more comfortable keeping an open line of communication with me because we've had it already.
And as far as your platform goes, what are the key points that you're running on?
Yeah, so the first one is definitely to streamline the funding request process. I feel like there's a lot of information in a lot of different places right now, and I really want to make that easier and more accessible for student organizations to find and utilize. The next is to keep an open line of communication with the finance committee and student organizations, because like I said, it got really confusing while we were working sometimes, if they didn't know who to contact or where they could ask questions. So I want to make sure that I'm that person that they can come to and ask. And I would say finally, just making things fair for everyone and making sure all organizations have an equal opportunity to get funding and are informed the way they need to be in order to get funding, not just people who know people in student government.
And you mentioned streamlining more as one of those key points. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the first thing is I want to make our folders a little bit more organized, because right now the only thing on the drive is there's a link that we send to organizations that have already requested funding, and it's definitely open to the public, but not everyone knows about it. So I really want to make sure that that's more publicized and work with the vice president's office in order to do that. And I also think having more treasurers workshops will help, because right now there's only 1 or 2 a semester, and organizations can request private ones, but once again, that's not known very well. So I think that if I work with like the outreach team to get that on social media, and also go through and like communicate with student organizations who I know are interested in working with funding, that will be, once again, the process is pretty straightforward now, but no one knows about it. So if we communicate it to more organizations, it will be easier and more understandable.
Yeah, and you mentioned this kind of earlier on, but obviously the position of treasurer was dissolved originally after concerns over, allocation of funds. How will you work to like solve these issues as like the position returns?
Yeah, so like I said, I was the person who was taking a lot of the brunt of transitioning out of the treasurer's office, because I was holding interviews with the Secretary of Finance and the Deputy Secretaries of Finance. And that was one of the biggest issues, I would say, was when we didn't have the treasurer, we went a period in the term without having anyone who's in charge of the university's finances, which was very problematic because we didn't have a candidate up front. So we had to wait until they went through an interview process and like got confirmed. So I would say it will still be a very similar process, but we'll be able to start a lot of the preparation and work beforehand, instead of being a little bit into the semester with requests already piling up. It will be, we'll be able to prepare more, I would say, is the biggest thing.
And what do you think are the core responsibilities of the treasurer position?
Yeah, so the first key thing of the treasurer is to look over all the comptrollers, who are the ones who are looking over and approving requests before they reach the finance committee. So basically, they get a batch of student organizations. So usually it's based on like what the student organization does. So like one comptroller might get like religious and like volunteer work groups. Another might get sports and like minority education, and another might get LGBTQ plus and like games. And they look over those requests and make sure that they follow all of the basic guidelines before they go to the finance committee. And that's a really helpful role, because it makes sure that student organizations have their best foot forward when going to the finance committee, which makes it more likely that they'll receive funding. So I would train those people, and also I would do that myself. I would both act as a comptroller and as like the supervisor of them. The next is to make the student government wide budget. So that's like when Senate or the VP office or the president needs money for certain initiatives we do, I would make that budget up front, which I actually facilitated in doing last time, and help the Senate make the bill to pass that. And then finally, it's to communicate with student organizations to make sure they know who their comptrollers are, to make sure they receive the proper training by going to treasurers workshops, and that they know how to make requests and that it's not confusing, and just to hold an open like line of communication between them.
Yeah. And what do you hope to see come out of this position, since it is being reinstated?
I really hope to see students less confused on how to request funding, and to really feel like they're being heard, and to make it so that the future chair of the finance committee also feels like they have they're more supported in their role, and that there is like a line between the executive team and the Senate Finance Committee, because I feel like right now everyone feels a little isolated and also like overworked, and I really just hope to kind of ease that.
Yeah. What do you think like the student body is looking for this, like from this position? Like what do you think they're hoping to see?
I really think they're hoping to see someone who helps them make requesting funding easier. I know that I've reiterated that quite a bit throughout this interview, but like I said, I've been talking to a lot of them for a long time now, and that's always the biggest complaint, is that it's very hard to know who to communicate with and where to request funding. And I've really tried to hear out everyone's complaints with that, because I know that it's frustrating, and I know that that's what the treasurer is supposed to do. And it was weird when we didn't know that when there wasn't a treasurer and we didn't know who to communicate with, that made it very confusing, and students don't have the time to be walking through like a bazillion different hoops to get funding. They want it to be easy. They want to know how to do it. And it should be that way. We want student organizations to be able to hold their events and go to tournaments. Like that's how we make the school a better and more fulfilling place. And students are out there doing that. It should be easy and accessible for them to do that.
Yeah, and obviously in the past there's been, a little bit of a concern with the student body not being heavily invested or interested in student government processes and that type of thing. How do you plan on engaging students in these processes when, like you said, it's important that they know how to do them?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, because to really advertise that it's money they can use for their clubs and organizations to make them better, to hold events and go to tournaments. Those are all great opportunities. And a lot of people are very involved on campus, just not necessarily with student government. And they think that the process is difficult and messy. And so they just don't even want to think about that. And I know that because the organization I'm involved with, Gamecock Consulting, we go to a lot of different case competitions and hold events. And a lot of their biggest thing when I joined, I was like, why aren't we requesting from student government? Like that's money that we could be getting from the school, like to do all these things instead of having to constantly raise our dues and fundraise nonstop. And they were like, no one knows how to do it. Like, it's just too messy. Like, we just don't like getting them involved. And so that was definitely one of the first steps I took when I became treasurer of that organization. And so it's just advertising things like that, like making it so that, like, because once I showed our president how to do it, he was like, oh, this is really easy. He was like, I don't know why we didn't do this sooner. Just no one knew about it. So I would say just really advertising the fact that they can use their ideas like through student government. Like we can enable them to make improvements on campus, like with them, not just through us. Like, because Senate's great, but like it doesn't always feel like they're like the student body in the Senate's like totally connected, but because they like might not directly get a vote, even though they are having like representation, but that's a way that they can directly get resources from student government.
Yeah, and overall, why should students vote for you?
I would say I definitely have the experience needed. I have been involved in student government since the beginning of my term, and with the finance committee specifically. I've seen the whole process and I know it very well. I think that will make me the best person to articulate it well to students and connect with them. I'm very heavily involved on campus, so I know people very well. And I would say I'm not a very intimidating person at all, so I'm easy to talk to, and that will make it easier to communicate with me.
Yeah, is there anything else that, I didn't ask you or we didn't touch on that you would like to mention to students now?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay, awesome. So that is it.